Hello, this is Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Bregman of the Jewish Executive Learning Network and BregmanSuccess.com. Thursday night, it's actually 11:46 now, so it is definitely time to record some insights into this week's Torah portion, because if not now, when, right? So this week's Torah portion is Torah Portion Vayikra. I'd like to share with you a nice insight or two, or actually 5 or 10 from this week's Torah portion in my Sefer and my commentary, short and sweet on the Parsha. And this Devar Torah in part 1 and 2 in the book, it's called Moses was the Aleph male. Get it? Alpha male, Aleph male. You'll see why I say Aleph, the letter, in a moment. So this week's Torah portion is called Vayikra, and it's pretty well known that the letter Aleph, which is the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph base, is small. The letter Aleph is written small at the end of the word Vayikra. So if you open the Chumash, you open the Torah, a Torah scroll or the printed book, you'll see that the word Vayikra at the beginning of this week's Torah portion, the last letter at the end, the Aleph, is written small. Question is, why? So the Balaturim and many other classic commentaries point out that the word Vayikar, which would be like Vayikra, but without the Aleph at the end, Vayikar is the word that Hashem used when he called out to speak to Bilam. Bilam, in the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, chapter 23, you see was a non-Jewish prophet. And the word Vayikar is the word Hashem used when calling to speak to Bilam. So what happened was, Balaturim and others say that Moshe, in his extreme humility, he wanted to use the same word to describe himself as Hashem used to speak to Bilam. Moshe didn't want the Aleph added at the end, as Hashem had desired, because the word Vayikra, which is the word he ended up getting stuck with, actually carries a connotation of Hashem's extra affection for him and Moshe's high spiritual standing. Specifically, the word Vayikra has a connotation that Moshe always stood like in a state of spiritual preparedness to speak to Hashem. But in contrast, Vayikar is like the word mikra in Hebrew, which has a connotation of randomness. So Moshe wanted the word Vayikar, which is like mikra, randomness, to say, like, God may speak to me, maybe I was ready, maybe I wasn't, maybe I could handle it, maybe I couldn't, maybe I was available, maybe I wasn't. And so that's what he wanted, the same word that Hashem used for the prophet Bilam to describe his prophecy. And that's what Moshe wanted. And Hashem's like, no, I want you to have Vayikra, which shows that you're dear and precious to me. And that he was always ready to go. So what happened? So the Balaturim and others explained there was a compromise position, and that was Moshe followed Hashem's instruction, and he included the letter Aleph in the spelling of the word. So instead of Vayikar, it was Vayikra, but he wrote the Aleph small, and that was the pshara, that was the compromise position. So what happened in the end? So Moshe wrote the letter Aleph small, and that's what he did. So as a result, Moshe didn't end up using all of the ink that Hashem had allocated towards writing this original Sefer Torah scroll at Mount Sinai. So that means there was a little bit of ink left over when he finished. So what happened to that leftover ink? So the Medrash Tanchuma, in Parshas Kisisa, under Ois Lamed Zayin, under letter 37, says over there that Hashem took the leftover ink and smeared some of it onto Moses' face, onto Moshe's face. And that's what caused Moshe's face to shine when he descended from Mount Sinai. If you look in the book of Exodus, chapter 34, verses 29 to 35, it says that Moshe's face was shining when he came down from Har Sinai, from Mount Sinai, to the point that he had to wear a mask when he would speak to the people. So, according to the Midrash and Medrash Tanchuma, this leftover ink that resulted from the fact that he wrote the word Vayikra with a small aleph instead of standard size, that was the makar, that was the source for this extra ink that got smeared on his face, and that made his face shine. Okay, so far so good. Now, there's more to say over here, but I'll immediately jump to part 2. And I'd like to connect what we said a few moments ago about Moshe and seeking humility and the like to a famous teaching in the Talmud in Tractate Eruvin, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis 13b. The Talmud says over there that whoever lowers himself, then Hashem is going to raise that person up. But whoever in his arrogance tries to elevate himself, Hashem will humble the person and lower that person down. The Talmud over there, also in Eruvin, states that whoever searches for prominence, prominence is going to flee from him. But whoever flees from prominence, prominence searches after him. Seems like a riddle, like the thing you go after goes away from you. But if you leave it alone or run away from it, it comes to you. Also, similarly, the Midrash says in Medrash Tanchuma, that if a person seeks honor, honor will flee from him. If you flee from recognition, recognition will ultimately find you. And it seems like I'm saying the same thing again and again, but I'm not. Review this audio and you'll see that I'm using similar words, but they're actually different words in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew to describe these dynamics and traits if you go after and if you flee. I'll give you another little bit similar. There's a similar statement about honor found in a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, in Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 1, Mishnah 13, that says, he who seeks renown will end up losing his reputation. And you also find this, and I write this in short and sweet on the Parsha, all these marmakaimis, all these sources. You find this in Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, that King Solomon wrote, chapter 29, verse 23. It says that a man's pride will bring him low, but a lowly spirit will end up supporting his honor. The same dynamic. So what do I want over here? What's the connection of all of these honor sources and fleeing and running away and arrogance and prominence and honor? And all? What does it have to do with this week's Torah portion? So I suggest to you like this. You see that Moshe attempted to flee from honor, maybe by putting the aleph small or something like that. That's what he wanted. He wanted to flee from honor. He didn't want the full measure of his greatness mentioned. But the honor ended up pursuing him in the end because his shining face proclaimed to everybody his enormous spiritual standing. Moshe tried to minimize his greatness, and he showed humility, and in the end, it ended up, so to speak, coming back on him and showing his greatness. So what do I want to say over here? It's an axiom of Torah thought that a person doesn't need to go run out there and seek recognition or lower yourself in some kind of way by seeking honor. If a person will merely continue to carry out the will of Hashem, recognition will ultimately be his or hers. It's going to happen. For example, the Gemara says in Tractate Mayed Katan in the Talmud, on page 16b, that any guy who engages deeply in the study of Torah within the Beis Medrash, within the Torah study hall, ultimately that person can be assured that his learning will ultimately proclaim him abroad to the entire world. So the bottom line point of this is, if you are a Jew, or you want to learn Torah and spread Torah, it's ultimately going to happen for you that people will know that you know your stuff. The key thing to focus in on is not trying to draw attention to yourself, but rather doing the will of Hashem. All the most famous rabbis in the world spend years and years and years, in many cases decades, banging away in their Torah study with sincerity, and for deep into the night, and from early in the morning, and everything in between, before people ever heard of them. Sometimes for a decade, sometimes for 15 years, sometimes for 20 years, sometimes for 50 years, before the world, quote-unquote, discovered who they are. And if you're ultimately the real thing, Hashem will make sure that people find out who you are and your name will get out there. And when it happens, it'll happen, as we say in Torah language, mamele, like it'll almost happen automatically. That word of what you have to offer will ultimately, it'll spread and it'll happen. So that's an interesting insight. And we see this and we learn this all out from the fact that the word Vayikra is written with a small Aleph at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. Anyway, hope you thought that was cool. This is from this week's Torah portion, a little bit of what I write in short and sweet on the Parsha, my commentary on the weekly Torah portion, about 550 pages of it. That was a little bit from 246 and page 247, with a smattering of 248, but just a little bit. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this week's Shi'ur, this week's Torah class on the Parsha. This is Rabbi Bregman. Please reach out to me directly if you'd like a copy of the Sefer. You can get it on Amazon.com. Drop me an email, director@jeln.org. And I wish you all a beautiful Shabbos. Hope you enjoyed this insight. Have a beautiful, beautiful night. All the best to you. Enjoy. Bye-bye.